Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Mr. Rohit Paranjpe, the co-founder of SugarBox, which is a patented hyperlocal edge cloud-based technology that is building the backbone of internet by simply augmenting the current infrastructure. Uh, Hi Rohit, welcome to ELI.
Thank you so much, Priya. Pleasure to be here.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure. I'm Rohit Paranjpe. I'm the co-founder and CEO of SugarBox Networks. Essentially, we're building the backbone of the internet of the future, as we call it. And over the last decade or so, the cloud and CDNs, which are content distribution networks, have pretty much been the backbone of the internet that we know today. Right, but two major shifts are happening. The first is people from all across the world are connecting to the internet. Right, it's not just tier one, tier two cities anymore, and all of these people are consuming more and more data. Right, so that is fundamentally adding a lot of sort of load on the internet, if I may put it
Mhm.
that way. I mean, literally in the last 15 years, the amount of data being transacted on the internet has grown 700 times. Right, so that's the first big piece of evolution that is happening on the internet. The second big piece of evolution is with all the newer technologies that are coming in, right? So until now, it was just people like you and I who were accessing the internet to be able to communicate with each other, to access data, so on and so forth.
Mm.
But now, probably over the next 3 to 5 years, the number of sensors in the world will far outweigh the number of people in the world, right?
Okay.
And when you talk about sensors, when you talk about IoT, when you talk about connected devices coming in, uh, there is two things that happen here. We as users use the internet 3, 4, 5 hours a day, but the sensors use the internet literally 24 by 7 by 365, right?
Mm.
Uh, and we will actively send X number of requests, let's say in a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes when we are actively consuming, but
Mm.
sensors are continuously sending and receiving information, right? And this adds another set of loads. The third critical thing that happens with Internet of Things and connected devices coming in is literally when you and I are accessing, right? Let's say the internet goes off for a second, right?
Okay.
At max, what will happen is our video will buffer,
Mm.
right? There's no major challenge that is going to happen.
Right.
It's an experience loss. But when connected systems are put into place, literally there might be a heat sensor in a factory. If this loses connectivity even for a split second, it
Mm.
actually might involve a fire, risk, hazard, so on and so forth, right? So the criticality of connectivity becomes super important,
Okay.
and which is where in this world that is evolving, and internet technologies as well as the utilization of the internet evolving, uh, it requires a fundamental shift in how the internet backbone functions, and that is really the core problem that we work on solving.
Mm.
Obviously it's an ecosystem wide shift, and we are
Okay.
just one of the stakeholders in it, that is actually driving that change.
Okay. Uh, Little more deep down on that.
Uh,
What is hyperlocal edge cloud?
Absolutely. So before I go to the hyperlocal edge cloud, right, I think I'll start from the cloud and then come lower
Yeah.
and lower,
Sure.
which is really where we come to. Uh, so basically, the concept of the cloud was very simple, right? The concept of the cloud was, uh, we all earlier were required to purchase servers, right? And when I say server, literally a phone is a server, a computer is a server. So basically, something that will have some sort of a processing power, some sort of a storage capacity, right?
Mm.
Uh, and what that meant is when corporations had to process large volumes of data, it required people to invest crores and crores of rupees upfront to purchase these servers, then put them inside a data center, have a full-fledged team to manage this infrastructure, so on and so forth, right? What a cloud did is a cloud said, hey, I can actually, as a business, set up this infrastructure myself and
Mm.
then lease very small portions of it to everybody, right? So that it becomes accessible to everyone. So that is where the cloud as an industry started. And the concept of the cloud was one entity that puts these lots and lots of compute and storage resources all over the world and expose it out to anybody who wants it, literally on a rental basis, right? The second key thing that happened in this industry is something called as a content distribution network, or a CDN,
Mm.
right? The logic of a CDN is very simple. It's the digital equivalent of a distribution system that is built even in the physical world, right?
Okay.
So today, if you look at the physical world, and let's take an example of an e-commerce company, right?
Mm.
An e-commerce company does not deliver goods to everybody around India from one central warehouse, right? They have central warehouses, then they have regional warehouses, then they have city level warehouses. Now they literally have area level warehouses,
Mm.
right? The reason for having these warehouses is because you can deliver things faster. You can distribute the load from one point and across multiple points, so on and so forth, right? Uh, Similarly, on the internet, CDNs are the digital warehouses, right? They do the exact same thing, and their evolution has been very similar to the physical distribution aspect as well, right? So they started out from nationwide caches, and then
Mm.
from nationwide moved to regional, from regional moved to state, cities, and today in very large cities like Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, you literally have CDN distribution nodes that are at an area level inside these cities, right?
Okay.
So the second big thing that happened is CDNs came into the picture and sort of helped with the distribution. Now what is happening is, with the amount of data that is being transacted on the internet, right? Uh, the cloud is now moving towards something called as an edge cloud,
Mm-hmm.
and the edge cloud is nothing but the first version of the cloud was, let's build mammoth data centers with lots and lots of resources in one place.
Mm.
Now those one single cloud data centers are starting to act as bottlenecks. And so the concept of edge cloud is, hey, let's take this cloud, break it into smaller pieces, and put
Okay.
it closer to the user, right?
Mhm.
The benefit of putting it closer to the user is multifold. The benefit of putting it closer to the user is you are utilizing lesser number of hops on the internet,
Mm.
right? So lesser exposure of the internet. The second is, the closer the server is to the user, the response times are far better, right?
Correct.
And so our end user experience is much better. The third is, because of distribution, you are also able to distribute peak loads, right? So today
Mm.
what happens is, on a normal basis, our internet may work fine, but the
Mm.
moment at 9 p.m. when everybody is connecting to the internet, the speed goes down,
Mm.
right? Or let's say if there is an IPL match going on where everyone is going to consume video, your internet starts struggling, right? And so by distribution, you are able to distribute these loads as well. So the world is now in this decade going to move towards the edge cloud, right? How do you break up data centers into smaller pieces, put them closer to the user? Uh, and on this front, actually, we are very unique in what we do. So the technology that we really invented and patented is something called as an hyperlocal edge cloud. And what I mean by a hyperlocal edge cloud is literally a very tiny fragment of the cloud that can be
Mm.
installed inside a user's network itself, right? And what
Okay.
I mean by a user's network is, let's say, the Wi-Fi inside our home, or the Wi-Fi inside our building complex, inside our office, inside a hotel, inside a mall, inside an airport, any
Mm.
place where we are already, where consumers are already present and
Mm.
consumers are consuming data, we can actually have a tiny fragment of the cloud installed right there.
Okay.
The best part that now happens is, when we are able to do this, even
Mm.
if your internet connection at the back goes off, or your internet connection at the back is not stable enough, or
Mm.
let's say you are in a place where coverage is not good enough, or you are in a place like an airport wherein
Mm.
coverage is okay, but there are 30,000 people that are congregating in one particular place, right? And so the
Mm.
existing infrastructure can't support it because of the concentration. We are actually able to solve all of these problems by putting this technology inside the user network itself.
Okay.
So yeah,
Understood.
so that is basically what we do. If you look at it from a core problem perspective, right, and I think that is where it sort of starts making a lot more sense.
Sure.
I'll divide the world into three parts, right? The first part is something that is called as well served, right? Well
Mm.
served is all of us, the top 300 million people in India. Most of the times we have decent internet access, right? Be it
Mm.
via our Wi-Fi connections, be it via our LTE connections. But here, what is happening is our appetite is growing, right? And not just appetite in terms of the amount of data that we consume or the amount of hours that we consume, but
Mm.
even the quality of data that we want to consume, right? Earlier, we were consuming 720p content. Now we want to consume 1080p content. In a year or so, you'd want to consume 4K content, right?
Mm.
And what it does is, the moment you go from 720p to 1080p, the amount of data that is consumed by you for the same 1 hour of content that you're watching literally becomes 4 times more,
Mm.
And the moment you move from 1080p to 4K, it literally becomes 16 times more, right? And
Right.
that's the exponential effect that happens on the internet. Uh, so by putting fragments of the cloud inside user networks, we are
Hmm.
actually able to increase the capacity of the internet by up to 50 times, right?
Okay.
So that is where we say building the backbone of the future, because the current systems, if everyone started, let's say, streaming data in 1080p or
Hmm.
even in 4K, right? The current infrastructure won't be able to support it, which is where, if you remember, right at the start of the first lockdown last year, uh,
Hmm.
the Telecom Authority of India actually released a mandate to all the OTT providers
Hmm.
saying disable HD content on your platform, right?
Okay.
Because everyone all of a sudden was at home. Everyone was trying to consume HD content on their devices, and
Hmm.
that was causing a really really bad pressure and bottleneck on the internet.
Okay.
Right. So that is basically the reality of where we are in the well-served space, and that is the problem that SugarBox is trying to solve in the well-served space. Similarly, if you now move from the well-served to the underserved, where networks don't reach reliably, or
Hmm.
go down to the unserved, where people are not connected at all, right?
Hmm.
By putting these fragments of the cloud inside public Wi-Fi networks, we are actually able to make public Wi-Fi as a concept sustainable, uh, enable free access to people for essential digital services, make make services function seamlessly even when networks aren't seamless, right? So let's take an example of public transport.
Okay.
Today, when we, let's say, travel on a train or inside a metro, our network keeps flipping, right? And
Right.
that is why, let's say, if we want to stream an IPL match while we are there, or if we want to watch HD content while we are in the train, it becomes very difficult, right? Because the network
Correct.
goes off, it keeps buffering.
Yep.
Even if you're trying to make a call, our calls drop, so on and so forth, right? So again, by putting an edge cloud node inside the train itself, we are able to solve this problem at least for 60-70% of user consumption,
Hmm.
wherein experience will be seamless. Even if the connectivity goes off for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it doesn't matter. Your video will keep playing seamlessly. Uh, and similarly, right down in absolute, let's say, the rural areas where internet hasn't reached at all, or if we talk about aircraft where internet hasn't reached at all, we are
Hmm.
actually able to deploy this technology and make at least certain services work, right? So when we go to rural, we make services like government services, financial services, education, healthcare, telemedicine, etc., which are the essential services that anybody, irrespective of who or where they are, should have
Hmm.
access to, right? So that is what we are able to work there. If you go inside aircraft, we're able to make your existing OTT platforms, your existing e-commerce platforms, your existing payment platforms work inside an aircraft even when connectivity is not available. So these are all of the problems that we try to solve across the well-served to the unserved.
Okay. From technology standpoint, I think this is superb. But I'm very curious to know the business side of it, how the venture has evolved over the years, especially how it all started and who were the first few customers who tried your product.
Obviously. So from a business perspective, it actually has been a really, really big evolution, right? Because we are literally, I mean, see what happens on the internet side is you may create great technology,
Hmm.
right? But the internet is such a vast ecosystem that until everybody buys into that technology and everybody sort of benefits from that technology, it
Hmm.
is going to be very difficult to deliver it to the internet, right? Because for the internet to work fine for a user, you need the infrastructure guys to collaborate with you. You need the internet service providers to collaborate with you. You need the cloud companies to collaborate with you, the content distribution companies to collaborate with you.
Hmm.
It's a really, really large ecosystem at the back.
Hmm.
And so what has really happened is we've been able to work out a model
Hmm.
that benefits the user, that benefits the digital services, and that benefits the networks as well, right? And I think that has been our largest sort of development that has happened over the last 2 to 3 years, to figure out this model where everyone benefits, right? And as an ecosystem, we can collaborate together to make the internet better. So that has been the first key part. But from an evolution perspective, we literally started by going right down to the consumer, right? So
Okay.
we identified places where consumers were struggling the most with connectivity,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was a combination of public transport, it was a combination of villages, it was a combination of areas of high concentration like malls and airports, and then certain specific sort of establishments like hospitals and educational institutes, because of the way they are constructed or because they're spread out, right? The
mm,
network coverage is always a problem. So these are the sort of clear opportunities that we identified to start with. And we started working with these establishments to figure out how can we deploy this technology, how can we solve problems for their consumers as well as for them, right? Because they also have their internal systems that need to run, that require connectivity, so on and so forth. So that is what we did on the network side.
mm,
And then alternatively on the app side, again, what happened is the biggest brunt of the internet is faced by the video players, right?
mm.
Because video requires the most amount of bandwidth.
Right.
So that is where we found Z5 as an index customer. We started working with Z5 very early in the day, uh, and worked very closely with them to figure out how can we make their experience better. How can we figure out ways in which people will be able to access video content and OTT even in places where connectivity doesn't exist, right? How
Mm,
does an OTT platform reach the next 500 million people in India, so on and so forth. So that is OTT was one major foray for us. The second key part that comes in is payments, right?
mm.
Finally, you may activate a service, but you need to enable payments. And if payments can't work, there is no way to monetize it.
Right.
So that is where we started working with wallet and buy now, pay later. So prepaid and postpaid wallet guys, to figure out how can we make existing wallets operate in places where connectivity doesn't exist or where connectivity goes off for a moment, right? Today, what happens is when you're trying to process a transaction, even if for a split second your connectivity goes off, the transaction fails, right? So how do we basically create a mechanism where payments can succeed? Uh, the third key part was coming to digital education, right? Especially in the last couple of years with COVID, that is a real problem that happened. And although a lot of digital edtech players came into the picture, the biggest problem was for the grassroots. Access was a big problem, right? They didn't have connectivity. I mean, there are enough and more sort of reports that have been released over the last couple of years to say that probably about 40 to 45% of students uh, to whom digital education has been offered by the school or by the educational institute can't actually leverage it because they don't have reliable internet access, right? So this is where we got into a very interesting model, started working with the NGOs and the CSR ecosystem in the country to sort of bridge the gap. We also tried to collaborate with device manufacturers because one big problem also was that even if we gave them access, they didn't have a device to access it on, right? So we had to sort of bridge that gap as well. So yeah, so this is basically everything that has been happening on the digital ecosystem side.
Mm,
And now after these three key things, the next piece that we're moving to is commerce, right? How do we solve for commerce in places where people are captive, in places where people have time, be it inside an aircraft or in a train or
mm,
inside a village, right? Because rural commerce is literally going to be a shift or a turning point for the digital economy in India,
mm.
and we sort of want to pioneer that in terms of a delivery perspective.
Okay. Very interesting. Uh, can you also tell us what are the different challenges that you have faced so far while building and growing?
Oh, of course, I think we face challenges all the time, and what we do is so unique that literally everything from an operating system release, right, uh, to everything that happens in the industry, it continues to be a big challenge for us, uh, because what we're trying to, so literally, right, at a fundamental level,
Mm,
what we are trying to tell all digital services is that even if the internet is unavailable, or even if the internet is unreliable,
mm,
or even if the internet is slow, we can make your application work seamlessly, like as if everything was just working perfectly fine. But the way the applications are not built like this, right? All applications are built under a fundamental assumption that the application is supposed to work only when internet connectivity is available,
mm,
right? And that is where it's a huge sort of mind shift that needs to happen across the board to be able to make this function. The second key piece, or a second key challenge that happens for a newer technology like this, right, is until there is critical mass of platforms that are supported.
mm,
Today, what happens for a consumer is when a consumer connects to Wi-Fi, a consumer expects that everything on the internet will work, right? But we are not an internet service provider, we are a cloud provider.
mm,
And so, as a cloud provider, we can literally only support the services that are integrated with our cloud, right? And so it is very difficult to sort of make this uh, translate this down to the consumer, saying, hey, this is a very different kind of Wi-Fi. This is not a Wi-Fi where you will get access to the whole internet. This is where you will get access to only these 10 platforms that are integrated today, and we have X number of platforms that are coming to this particular stack next month, and the
Mm.
month after that, and the month after that. So these are the two major challenges that we have always sort of dealt with, uh, both from a consumer side and an ecosystem side.
Okay. Uh, Speaking of the finances, can you tell us how did you fund the operations so far, at least till the time you reached profitability?
Sure. So today we're not profitable, and when I say we're not profitable at a unit EBITDA level, right? So we are burning money today. Luckily for us, we are actually able to raise money very early in the day, and our first investor itself sort of doubled down with an additional investment in 2020, right?
Mm.
Especially when COVID hit, everyone was sort of struggling with respect to what's going to happen. So that was really, really encouraging for us. And I think that has been a good part. So we've been well funded for literally about 8 months from the time we started the company.
Mhm.
And that has really helped us to sort of just focus on, see what happens, right? Is core technology development and core technology evolution, right? Is something that can't happen overnight,
Right.
right? You need to invest significant amount of resources. I mean, let's look at the cloud, right? The cloud, from the time it was conceptualized to the time it became mainstream,
Mm.
took close to about 12 years,
Right.
right? And I wouldn't say that it took 12 years to build that technology, but it took 12 years to stabilize that technology to reach mass adoption, right?
Mm.
Obviously, things move much faster now than it used to 15, 16 years back. But still, you're talking about a 6 to 8 year period, right? And that
Mm.
requires a lot of money, that requires a lot of commitment from investors who might not see immediate traction,
Correct.
right? And I think that is where we've been very lucky to have investors that have supported us through this journey.
Any pivots that you have done to the business model?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the largest pivot was to, so when we started out in 2016, right?
Mm.
Uh, the problem that we are trying to solve literally was, there are people who don't have reliable internet access, right?
Mm.
And they want to consume video on their phones. Video requires a lot of bandwidth. How
Correct.
will they ever be able to do it, right? And that is the core problem that we wanted to solve. And in 2016, when we actually started the company,
Mm.
what we had in mind was literally, I mean, if you've traveled in a Vistara aircraft or a Jet Airways aircraft, right, you have this box that is
Correct.
installed. You have a local Wi-Fi. There is some content put on it that you can
Mm.
stream, right? And in 2016, when we started the company, our ideology literally was, can we take that box, can we
Mm.
make it scalable so that it can be actually, like, it can be installed in places where it matters, right? Can we install it in trains, can we install it in buses, can we install it in public places, can we install it in villages, because that is where people really struggle with connectivity.
Mm.
uh, so that is where we really started. But over the last 4 years, the technology evolved, we evolved as a platform, we sort of became an edge cloud platform. A lot of different things happened from a technology sort of breakthrough perspective, a lot of patents being granted to us, so on and so forth.
Right.
And those technology evolutions automatically shifted the business model, right? So earlier when we started, it was supposed to be a very simple thing. We're going to take content from someone, sell it to consumers. Today we don't, neither do we buy content, neither do we sell content. The business is not about content at all. It's about all kinds of digital services.
Mm.
We are literally exploring newer forms of AR VR applications running on our stack. We are looking at smart APIs and smart algorithms that can be consumed by other digital services to do something. We're talking about an infrastructure as a service model where we have infrastructure deployed which other cloud platforms can leverage, right?
Mm.
So that digital services don't really need to come to us independently every single time. They can just go to an existing cloud provider, and SugarBox will work as a part of an existing cloud stack itself.
Mm.
So a lot of different sort of business model changes. I wouldn't call them pivots. They're more evolution to the model than pivots from the model. But yes, a lot of evolution has happened. And this industry actually as a whole is evolving, right? Edge cloud as a concept is so new
Mm.
that literally everybody around the world will talk about edge cloud, but everybody around the world has a different flavor or a different perspective on what edge cloud means.
Okay. I have many more questions, but due to constraint of time, I'll just ask two more questions.
Sure,
Can you tell us what is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How do you define the term entrepreneur?
sure. So I think for me, it very simply comes down to, are you solving a problem that is affecting a lot of people gravely, right? And these are very, very important sort of words. The first is it a grave enough problem, right? Because if
Mm.
it's not a grave enough problem, maybe people will like it, but maybe people will figure out other alternatives that may work far better, right? The second, again, it comes a lot of people, right? Are you solving a problem for 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 people? Or are you solving problems for millions to billions of people? Again, defines what is the relevance of what you're trying to do, right? But I think the first part where I started from, the most important thing as an entrepreneur is solve a problem. If you're
Mm.
not solving a problem, then you're not being an entrepreneur.
Okay. And my final question, can you tell us about the lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, especially the interesting lessons that you have learned, which we can take away and apply to our lives and our ventures?
Sure. I mean, there are so many lessons. It's so difficult to sort of generalize it in a lesson or two. But I'll give you probably two or three critical
Yeah.
aspects, right? Uh, I think the first critical aspect comes down to people, and I always say this: the company is as good as the set of people. It
Mm.
doesn't matter how good a problem you're solving, how well are you solving it. If you don't have the right people, you will struggle. Uh, so the first thing that comes down to is people, right? And another thing that I've learned, and again, repetitive, I'm sure a lot of people have said this, but it's still absolutely relevant and true, right? It doesn't matter how good the person is.
Mm.
What really matters is the fit, right? You guys gel together as a team. uh, Even if you don't have people who come from the best institutes, the best experience, the best companies, but if you guys are able to complement each other
Mm.
and collectively sort of solve critical aspects of what is required for a business, you will
Mm.
actually have a far better chance to succeed than having people from great backgrounds coming together, right? So I think that has been one of the most important problems. And again, in the same breath, one thing that I've also learned is, if it's more of an art than a science, right? You
Mm.
don't know who's going to fit perfectly.
Correct.
uh, and that is where, when you realize that if something is not fitting,
Mm.
it's best to be proactive about it. uh, you know Literally address the issue at hand.
Mm.
uh, Talk to the person, say, hey, these are the problems, this is where we believe we don't fit, and let's either make a way to bridge that gap and work together, or
Mm.
let's call it quits, right? I don't think a lot of people have tough enough conversations early enough, and the more you delay this conversation, you're wasting time for the venture, which pretty much is like the lifeline of the venture, right? Time is the most critical asset in any venture.
Mm.
So this is basically a few very, very critical learnings on the people front. uh, on the business front, again, I will say it with all my heart: have fundamental value, right?
Mm.
And what I mean by fundamental value is, it doesn't matter whether you're profitable today or not, right?
Mm.
But you need to have a very clear visibility of how will you ever make money, right? One thing that I've sort of struggled with a lot with Indian entrepreneurs is, they don't have an inkling of clue as to how will they ever make money, right?
Okay.
It And if that is what your business is going to be structured on, then you need to have a very clear road to how will I raise my next round and my next round and my next round. And your entire life is pretty much dependent on how are you going to raise your next round, not how are you going to raise a company or build a business, right? So one point that I would always have is, it doesn't matter if you don't make money for the next 10 years, but have
Mm.
a very clear understanding of how will you make money and when will you make money. Uh, so I think that is one very, very critical aspect that I have sort of realized. Uh, the third thing that comes into the picture, obviously, is understand priority, right? One thing that I have seen people struggle with a lot as entrepreneurs, right? And you will see this being spoken too many times, that as an entrepreneur, you're the peon as well and the CEO as well, right? And it's great to say that, but at some point you need to start thinking through what are the top 10-20% of the things that my
mm,
company needs, right? And you as an entrepreneur or a CEO should actually start focusing only on that 10 to 20%. What entrepreneurs don't realize enough is the more things that they get themselves into, they
mm,
are spreading themselves that much thinner,
mm, mm.
and you're not focusing on the top 20% problem that actually need your attention. You're actually exhausting your energy on the balance 80%. uh, so probably these are the three most representative lessons that I would want people to carry out.
Well, on this note, I think we have come to the end of the session. I would say it was a great pleasure to host you here at ELI. Thanks for your time, Rohit, and our best wishes for SugarBox.
Thank you so much, Priya. It was absolutely a pleasure to be on this. Thank you so much.